The great chamber of the Galactic Council floated in silence above the world called Cathara Prime. 12 species had sent their representatives to this place. They were old races, ancient beyond human understanding. They had seen empires rise and fall across 10,000 years. They believed they had seen everything. They were wrong. Ambassador Xyloth stood before the curved table where the council members sat. His gray skin reflected the soft light of distant stars through the massive windows behind him. He was a Valorian, and his people had watched the younger races of the galaxy for centuries. Today he brought news that made his two hearts beat with something close to fear. The Kareth Dominion has chosen its next target, he said. His voice was calm, but those who knew him well could hear the tension beneath. A small planet in the outer spiral arm. The natives call it Earth. A low murmur passed through the chamber. The Kareth were known to all. They were conquerors, destroyers, slavers. Their black ships had brought darkness to 100 worlds. No species had ever defeated them in open battle. Magistrate Orvine, the leader of the council, leaned forward in his chair. He was old even by the standards of his long-lived people. His 4 eyes blinked slowly as he considered the information. Earth, he repeated. The humans. They achieved faster than light, travel only 30 of their years ago. They are practically infants. Yes, Xyloth agreed. Our observations show them to be an aggressive species. They fight among themselves constantly. Their technology is primitive compared to even the youngest council races. They have no idea what is coming for them. Counselor Theron of the Ashori Empire made a sound of sympathy. Her feathered crest rippled with emotion. How many Kareth ships? Over 800 warships. Supreme Commander Vakresh leads them personally. The chamber fell silent. 800 ships. It was more than enough to destroy a dozen worlds. Against the humans, it was like using a star to burn an insect. We should warn them, Theron said quietly. Orvine shook his head. To what purpose? They cannot run. They cannot hide. And they certainly cannot fight. Warning them would only cause panic and suffering before the end. Then we do nothing? We observe. We record. We add another species to the list of those lost to the Kareth. It is unfortunate, but it is the way of things. The council members nodded slowly. They had seen this before. They would see it again. The strong consumed the weak. It was the oldest law of the universe. None of them could have imagined what would happen next. Far across the galaxy, on a planet of blue oceans and green forests, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Earth's Space Defense Network. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 40 years preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now it was here. Show me again, he said to the young officer at the sensor station. The holographic display flickered to life. It showed the edge of the solar system, and beyond it, a mass of contacts moving toward Earth. Each contact was a ship. There were so many that they looked like a cloud of locusts approaching a wheat field. 72 hours until they reach Earth orbit, the officer said. Her voice trembled slightly. Sir, what do we do? Morrison stared at the display for a long moment. Then he picked up his communicator and called the Secretary of Defense. Katie Sullivan answered on the second ring. She was in her office in Washington, surrounded by generals and advisors. She had already seen the sensor data. Her face on the screen was pale but composed. Jake, tell me this is a mistake. It's not a mistake, Katie. They're coming. And they're not here to talk. Sullivan closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were hard with determination. I'm patching in the president. Ryan Carter appeared on the screen moments later. He was in the Situation Room, surrounded by the most powerful leaders on Earth. He looked at Morrison with the calm expression of a man who had already accepted what was happening. Admiral, what are our options? Morrison took a deep breath. He had thought about this moment for years. He had planned for it, trained for it, dreamed about it in his worst nightmares. Now that it was real, he felt strangely calm. We fight, he said simply. We use everything we have. We make them pay for every inch of space they take. And maybe, if we're lucky and smart, and willing to sacrifice everything, we survive. Can we win? I don't know, sir. No one has ever beaten the Kareth. But no one has ever been humanity either. The president nodded slowly. Then we fight. Within hours, the word spread across the planet. Every nation received the same message. Every government faced the same choice. For the first time in human history, there was no debate about what to do. Factories that had been making cars began making weapons. Scientists who had been studying diseases began studying shield technology. Soldiers who had been enemies yesterday became brothers today. The petty conflicts that had divided humanity for thousands of years simply stopped. They stopped because something bigger had arrived, something that wanted to destroy them all. General Chris Lawson took command of Earth's ground forces. He was a quiet man, with a reputation for careful planning. Now he threw that reputation away and embraced bold action. There was no time for careful plans. There was only time to prepare. We need to assume they'll land troops, he told his staff. Every city needs to be ready, every town, every village. If they want Earth, they're going to have to take it from us, one street at a time. Across the world, people who had never held a weapon learned to fight. Farmers practiced with rifles. Teachers trained in first aid. Children helped build shelters. The human race looked up at the stars and saw death coming for them. And instead of running, instead of crying, instead of giving up, they got angry. On Cathara Prime, the Galactic Council dispatched a cloaked observation ship to watch the coming slaughter. They expected it to be over quickly. They expected to record another tragedy for their historical archives. They had no idea they were about to witness something that would change the galaxy forever. The Kareth were coming. And humanity was waiting for them. The sky above Earth's moon turned black with ships. They came out of hyperspace in a formation so large that sensors could not count them all at first. 800 warships, each one a mountain of metal and weapons, took their positions around Luna. The smallest of them was bigger than anything humanity had ever built. The largest were like floating cities, dark and terrible against the stars. Supreme Commander Vakresh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Darkness. He was tall for a Kareth, with 4 arms and skin like black iron. His eyes glowed red in the dim light of the command center. He had conquered 37 worlds in his career. He expected Earth to be the 38th. Open a channel to the planet, he ordered. Let them hear their fate. His message went out across all frequencies. Every radio, every television, every phone on Earth carried his words. People of Earth, I am Supreme Commander Vakresh of the Kareth Dominion. Your world now belongs to us. You will surrender immediately and completely. Those who obey will serve us. Those who resist will die. You have 1 hour to respond. He closed the channel and turned to his officers with a cold smile. They will surrender. They always do. But Vakresh had never met humans before. President Ryan Carter stood before the cameras in Washington. Behind him were the flags of every nation on Earth. Every leader who could be there stood with him. The others watched from their own capitals, ready to broadcast his response to their people. Commander Vakresh, Carter said. His voice was steady and clear. This is President Ryan Carter, speaking on behalf of all humanity. I have a message for you and your dominion. He paused for a moment. Then he leaned closer to the camera. We will not surrender. Not now. Not ever. This is our home. Our people have fought and died for this world for thousands of years. Every inch of Earth has been paid for with human blood. And if you want it, you're going to have to pay the same price. He straightened up and looked directly into the lens. You've conquered other worlds because those worlds gave up. We won't give up. We won't run. And we won't stop fighting until either you're dead or we are. So come ahead, Commander. Come and see what happens when you pick a fight with humanity. The broadcast ended. Across the planet, billions of people watched in silence. Then, slowly, a sound began to rise. It started in cities and spread to towns and villages. It was the sound of cheering, the sound of defiance. the sound of a species that had chosen to stand. On the Council's observation ship, hidden in the shadow of Mars, the representatives watched in confusion. They refused? Counselor Theron could not believe it. They actually refused to surrender? Ambassador Xyloth nodded slowly. His gray face showed something like wonder. They did. I have never seen anything like this. Enderloth. They are insane, another counselor muttered. They will all die for nothing. Perhaps, Xyloth said quietly. Or perhaps we are about to learn something new. On the bridge of the eternal darkness, Vakresh stared at the blank screen where Carter's face had been. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he began to laugh. Brave words from dead people, he said. All ships. Begin the attack. Destroy their orbital defenses. Then burn their cities one by one until they beg for mercy. The Kareth fleet began to move. Hundreds of warships advanced toward Earth like a wave of darkness rolling across the ocean. Their weapons charged with the power to shatter continents, but Earth was not undefended. Admiral Morrison watched the enemy fleet approach from his command station. Around him, officers worked at their consoles with calm efficiency. They were afraid. Everyone was afraid, but they had trained for this moment, and they would not fail. Signal all defense platforms, Morrison ordered. Weapons free. Make them earn every meter. Around Earth and the Moon, orbital defense stations came to life. They were small compared to the Kareth ships, mere insects against giants. But insects could sting. Missiles launched in great swarms. Energy beams cut across the void. The first Kareth fighters exploded in balls of fire, caught off guard by the intensity of the defense. Secretary Sullivan called from Washington. Her face on the screen showed fierce pride. Jake, the whole world is watching. Give them a show. We'll do better than that, Morrison replied. We'll give them a fight. On the ground, General Lawson coordinated the defense preparations. Every city had become a fortress. Every road had been blocked or trapped. Millions of civilians had been moved to underground shelters, but millions more had refused to go. They wanted to fight. An old farmer named Pete Cooper stood outside his house in Kansas, watching the lights of battle flicker in the night sky. His rifle was old, a family treasure from a war fought long ago. He knew it probably couldn't hurt the aliens. He didn't care. If they land here, he told his wife, they're going to find out what Americans are made of. She stood beside him and took his hand. Then they'll find out what American wives are made of too. Across the world, similar scenes played out. In Tokyo, office workers trained with improvised weapons. In London, retired soldiers taught young people how to fight in the streets. In Moscow, in Beijing, in Cairo, in Sydney, people who had never agreed on anything agreed on this. They would not go quietly. Dr. Brandon Cole worked frantically in his laboratory aboard the research station Athena, which orbited high above the battle. He was a physicist, not a soldier, but he understood that wars were won with knowledge as much as weapons. We need to find a weakness, he told his team. Every enemy has one. Help me find theirs. They bent over captured fragments of Kareth technology, searching for anything that might give humanity an edge. The clock was ticking. The fleet was coming. And Earth's defenders were already dying. The first major engagement began above the moon. Human ships, smaller and fewer, threw themselves at the Kareth advance. Many were destroyed in the first minutes. But they did not retreat. They could not retreat. Behind them was everything they loved. Captain Nicole Grant commanded the carrier Defiance from the heart of the battle. Her ship shook with every impact, but her voice remained steady on the command channel. All squadrons, maintain formation. Make every shot count. And remember what we're fighting for, her pilots answered with action. They flew into the face of death with their eyes open and their hearts full of fire. They were outmatched. They were outgunned. But they were not outfought. The battle for Earth had begun. Space above the moon burned with weapons fire. Captain Nicole Grant gripped the arms of her command chair as another explosion rocked the Defiance. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. Damage reports flooded in from every section. But the ship still flew, and her crew still fought. Enemy fighters coming in from Sector 7, her tactical officer reported. 20 contacts. Send Blue Squadron to intercept. Tell them to use the debris field for cover. The pilots of Blue Squadron heard her order and responded instantly. Their small fighters dove into the wreckage of destroyed ships, using the twisted metal as shields. The Kareth followed, expecting easy kills. They found something else. Human pilots had spent centuries learning to fight in difficult conditions. They had fought in storms and mountains and cities. They understood that the terrain was a weapon. Now they used the debris field like soldiers in a forest, appearing and disappearing, striking and retreating, drawing the enemy into traps. The Kareth fighters fell one by one, destroyed by enemies they could barely see. On the bridge of the eternal darkness, Supreme Commander Vakresh watched the battle with growing irritation. The humans were dying, yes, but they were dying slowly. And they were taking his ships with them. Why are they not breaking? He demanded. No species resists this long. His tactical officer studied the data with confusion. Commander, their pilots are performing maneuvers that should be impossible. The gravitational forces alone should kill them. Explain. Humans appear to have much higher tolerance for physical stress than any species in our records. They can withstand forces that would cause our pilots to lose consciousness. They are using this advantage to outmaneuver our fighters. Vakresh stared at the display. A primitive species with primitive ships was actually causing problems for the greatest fleet in the galaxy. It was impossible. It was insulting. Send in the heavy cruisers, he ordered. End this. The Council's observation ship hung in the shadow of a distant asteroid, recording everything. The representatives watched in stunned silence as the battle continued. Councillor Theron studied the combat data with growing amazement. These humans are extraordinary, she breathed. Look at this. A pilot ejected from a destroyed fighter. And instead of surrendering, she used her suit thrusters to guide her escape pod into an enemy ship's engine. Suicide attacks, Ambassador Xyloth said quietly. They are willing to die to cause damage. This is very rare behavior. Rare? It is almost unheard of. Even the Kareth avoid unnecessary death. The humans do not seem to consider any death unnecessary if it serves victory. The council members exchanged worried looks. They had expected to watch a quick execution. Instead, they were witnessing something that looked almost like a real battle. On Earth, Admiral Morrison coordinated the defense from his command center. The situation was desperate. They had lost 30% of their orbital defenses in the first hours, but they had destroyed over 50 Kareth ships in return. It's not enough, Morrison muttered to himself. We need something more. His communicator buzzed. It was Dr. Brandon Cole, calling from the Athena. Admiral, we've been studying the captured Kareth technology. We think we found something. Morrison's heart jumped. Tell me. Their shields operate on a specific frequency. If we can match that frequency with our weapons, we can punch through their defenses. It's like having a key to a lock. How long until you can implement this? Cole hesitated. We need more data. We need to capture an intact Kareth ship, or at least get close enough to scan one in detail. Morrison closed his eyes. Getting close to a Kareth ship meant almost certain death. But if there was a chance, any chance at all, they had to take it. I'll find you a volunteer. Lieutenant Dan Harris was 26 years old. He had joined the Space Defense Force because he wanted to protect people. He had never expected to actually fight aliens. Now he sat in his fighter, listening to his commanding officer explain the mission. You need to get within 1 kilometer of a Kareth destroyer, Admiral Morrison said. Your scanner needs to complete a full analysis. This will take approximately 90 seconds. During that time, you will be completely vulnerable. Harris nodded slowly. 90 seconds. I won't lie to you, Lieutenant. The odds of survival are very low. But if you succeed, you could give us the weapon we need to win this war. Harris thought about his parents in Ohio. He thought about his sister and her new baby. He thought about all the people on Earth who were counting on him without even knowing his name. "I'll do it," he said. His fighter launched into the chaos of battle. Enemy ships filled the space around him. Weapons fire crossed in every direction. He pushed his engines to maximum and dove toward the nearest destroyer. The Kareth noticed him immediately. Fighters turned to pursue. Point defense weapons tracked his path. He twisted and rolled, using every trick he had learned, every instinct he possessed. 1 kilometer. His scanner activated. 90 seconds began to count down. Laser fire burned past his cockpit. A missile exploded so close that his shields flickered. 70 seconds. 60. An enemy fighter appeared directly ahead. There was no time to dodge. Harris gritted his teeth and flew straight through the explosion, his own ship screaming with damage warnings. 40 seconds. 30. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on, come on, come on." A Kareth beam hit his left wing. The metal vaporized. His ship began to spin. He fought the controls with all his strength, keeping the scanner pointed at the target. 20 seconds. 10. Another hit. His cockpit cracked. Air began to rush out. He could feel the cold of space reaching for him. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The scanner completed its analysis. The data uploaded to the Athena. "Transmission complete," Harris reported. His voice was calm despite everything. "Tell my family I love them." His ship exploded 3 seconds later. Dr. Cole received the data and immediately went to work. His team had the frequency. They had the key. Now they just had to build the weapon. "How long?" Morrison asked. "Hours. Maybe a day. We may not have a day. Do it faster." Cole nodded. He understood. Every minute that passed meant more human deaths. He would not waste a single second. Above the moon, the Defiance took another critical hit. Captain Grant's bridge filled with smoke and sparks. Half her crew was dead or wounded, but she refused to abandon her post. "All ships," she broadcast to the fleet. "Hold the line. Hold it for 1 more hour. Help is coming." AR. They held. They bled and burned and died, but they held. Because that was what humans did. They held until there was nothing left to hold with. And then they held some more. The Defiance was dying. Captain Nicole Grant stood on her shattered bridge and watched the damage reports scroll across what remained of her screens. Fires burned in 6 compartments. The main weapons were offline. Life support was failing on 3 decks. Over 200 of her crew had been killed in the last hour. "Captain," her first officer said quietly, "we should evacuate. The ship can't take much more." Grant looked out through the cracked viewport at the battle still raging around them. Human ships were being destroyed faster than they could inflict damage. The Kareth fleet was pressing forward, unstoppable, overwhelming. Then her communicator crackled to life. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Protocol Omega is now active." "I repeat, Protocol Omega is active." Grant felt a chill run down her spine. Protocol Omega was the last resort. The desperate plan that existed only because humans had always prepared for the worst. It meant they had nothing left to lose. "All ships, maintain position," she ordered. Something is about to happen. Across the solar system, hidden weapons came to life. The asteroid belt had always been valuable to humanity. Mining ships had worked there for decades, extracting metals and minerals to build the space fleet. What no one outside the military knew was that many of those mining ships had been modified in secret. Now those ships activated their engines and began to accelerate, not toward Earth, toward the Kareth fleet. Commander Vakresh noticed them on his sensors and laughed. "Mining vessels? They think to attack us with mining vessels?" His tactical officer's face went pale. "Commander, those ships are accelerating beyond safe limits. They appear to be on collision courses." "What?" "They're ram ships, Commander. They're using themselves as weapons." The first converted mining ship struck a Kareth cruiser at nearly 1% of light speed. The impact was like a small sun exploding. The cruiser, a vessel that had destroyed a dozen worlds, vanished in an instant. The mining ship was gone too, along with its crew of volunteers who had known they would never come home. Then the second ship hit, and the third, and the fourth. On the Council's observation vessel, the representatives watched in horror. "They're killing themselves," Counselor Theron whispered. "They're throwing their own people at the enemy." Ambassador Xyloth nodded slowly. His gray skin had gone almost white. "I have read about this in ancient texts. My own species did similar things. Thousands of years ago. Before we became civilized. We called it the fury of the cornered beast. But they're not beasts. They're sentient beings. Yes. Sentient beings who have decided that victory matters more than life. This is what makes them terrifying." Create. The ramships were just the beginning. Deep in the debris fields that surrounded the battle, nuclear weapons hidden months ago began to detonate in sequence. The explosions were carefully placed, creating walls of radiation and shrapnel that disrupted Kareth formations and destroyed their smaller ships. On Earth's surface, submarines that had silently risen from the ocean launched their payloads into orbit. These were not ordinary missiles. They carried humanity's most destructive weapons, devices that had been banned by treaty but never destroyed. Now those treaties were meaningless. Now only survival mattered. Admiral Morrison stood at his command console and watched the tide of battle begin to shift. The Kareth were still winning, but they were no longer winning easily. Every inch of space now cost them ships and lives. "Dr. Cole," he called, "please tell me you have good news." Cole's face appeared on the screen. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright with triumph. "We cracked it, Admiral. We have the shield frequency. I'm transmitting the data to all ships now." "Now," Morrison allowed himself a small smile. "Outstanding work, Doctor. Everyone who died to get that information, their sacrifice meant something. Let's make sure it means even more. Let's win this thing." The new weapons data spread through the human fleet in minutes. Engineers worked frantically to adjust their targeting systems. Pilots updated their computers, and then, for the first time, human weapons began to punch through Kareth shields. Commander Vakresh felt real fear for the first time in his long life. "How?" he demanded. "How are they penetrating our shields?" "Unknown, Commander. But our losses are increasing rapidly." "Then increase power to the shields." "Commander, they appear to have adapted. Every change we make, they counter within minutes. It's as if they're learning faster than we can adjust." Vakresh stared at the display. His fleet, the most powerful force in the galaxy, was being hurt by primitives. By insects. By creatures who should have surrendered hours ago. "All ships," he ordered through gritted teeth. "Full assault. Destroy them all. Now." The Kareth launched their final attack. Every ship, every weapon, everything they had. They would overwhelm the humans through sheer force, or die trying. But humans had learned something about war that the Kareth had forgotten. When you fought to conquer, you tried to minimize your losses. When you fought to survive, you accepted any cost. Lieutenant Commander Scott Palmer flew his crippled fighter through the heart of the enemy fleet. His weapons were gone. His shields were gone. He had one thing left. He opened a channel to Earth. "Tell my daughter I love her. Tell her Daddy did something good." Then he aimed his fighter at the bridge of a Kareth destroyer and pushed his engines to maximum. The destroyer's captain had exactly 2 seconds to realize what was happening before Palmer's ship turned his bridge into fire and wreckage. Similar acts of sacrifice happened across the battlefield. A human cruiser, its weapons destroyed, rammed a Kareth carrier. A pilot whose ejection system had failed manually guided her burning ship into an enemy weapons platform. Again and again, humans chose death over defeat. The council members could no longer speak. They simply watched, unable to look away from the terrible beauty of what they were seeing. These creatures, these humans, were dying by the thousands, but they were taking the enemy with them, and slowly, impossibly, they were winning. The Kareth fleet began to break. Ships that had never retreated from any battle turned and ran. Commander Vakresh screamed orders that no one followed. His perfect invasion had become a disaster. Admiral Morrison watched the enemy retreat begin and felt tears run down his face. So many dead. So many good people gone forever. But they had done it. All ships, he said quietly. Pursue and destroy. No mercy, no prisoners. Make them remember this day forever. The human fleet surged forward. Battered. Broken. But undefeated. They chased the Karith toward the edge of the solar system. And they did not stop. Earth would be avenged. The hunt lasted for 3 days. Human ships chased the fleeing Karith fleet to the very edge of the solar system. They gave no quarter and accepted no surrender. Every enemy ship that fell behind was destroyed. Every escape pod was ignored. This was not war anymore. This was revenge. Admiral Morrison watched from his command center as the last Karith vessels jumped into hyperspace, fleeing toward their own territory. Of the 800 ships that had come to conquer Earth, fewer than 200 escaped. It's over, he said quietly. Around him, officers who had not slept in days broke down in tears. Some hugged each other. Some simply stared at their screens, unable to believe what had happened. They had faced the most powerful military force in the galaxy, and they had survived. More than survived. They had won. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. In every city, in every town, in every village, people poured into the streets to celebrate. Strangers embraced each other. Enemies became friends. For one shining moment, all of humanity was united in joy and relief. But the celebration was mixed with grief. The cost of victory had been terrible. Over 3 million soldiers and civilians had died. The Defiance and 17 other major ships had been destroyed. Captain Nicole Grant had gone down with her vessel, staying at her post until the very end. President Ryan Carter addressed the world from the steps of the ruined Capitol building, which had been hit by debris during the battle. Today we mourn our dead, he said. We honor those who gave everything so that we might live. They were our friends, our family, our heroes. We will never forget them. He paused and looked up at the sky, where the stars were visible even in daylight through the smoke that still hung in the air. But today we also celebrate. We celebrate because we proved something that the galaxy forgot. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not give up, and when you threaten our home, you learn why that matters. Far across the galaxy, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The chamber was completely silent as the observation footage played on the great screens. The council members watched humans drag wounded comrades to safety under fire. They watched pilots crash their ships into enemy vessels. They watched civilians pick up weapons and charge alien soldiers with nothing but farming tools and courage. Magistrate Orvine's hands trembled as he deactivated the display. He had led the council for 2 centuries. He had never felt fear like this. The Karith Dominion has been defeated, he said. Not just stopped, defeated. In all our recorded history, no one has ever done this. How? Asked Counselor Vex of the Meridian Confederacy. How did primitives with primitive weapons defeat the greatest military power in the galaxy? Ambassador Xyloth stepped forward. He had studied the footage carefully, searching for answers. What he found had kept him awake for 3 nights. The humans have something we do not, he said slowly. Something we evolved past long ago. They call it many things. Courage. Fury. The will to survive at any cost. We have courage, Counselor Theron protested. No. With respect, Counselor. We do not. Not like this. We are civilized species. We calculate costs and benefits. We surrender when victory becomes impossible. We preserve our lives because we value them. He gestured at the blank screen where the footage had played. Humans do not think this way. When they are threatened, something awakens in them. Something ancient and terrible. They become willing to die. Not because they do not value life, but because they value other things more. Freedom. Home. Family. They will burn themselves to ashes if it means their enemies burn with them. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They are dangerous, Counselor Vex said. Perhaps we should contain them. Limit their expansion. Prevent them from becoming a threat. Xyloth shook his head. That would be a mistake. The Karith thought they could contain the humans. Look what happened. Any species that threatens Earth will face the same fate. Then what do you suggest? I suggest we welcome them, make them our allies rather than our enemies. Because I believe the humans are not just dangerous. They are exactly what this galaxy needs. Theron leaned forward. Explain. The Karath have terrorized us for millennia. We accepted this because we believed nothing could stop them. Now we know we were wrong. The humans stopped them, and if the humans can defeat the Karath, they can defeat anyone who threatens the peace of the galaxy. You want to use them as weapons? I want to stand beside them as friends. I want to learn from them, and I want to make sure that when the next great darkness comes, humanity is fighting on our side. The council debated for hours. Some feared the humans, some admired them, some wanted nothing to do with them at all. But in the end, they reached a decision. 6 months later, a human diplomatic vessel arrived at Cathara Prime. Ambassador Lisa Grant stepped off the ship and looked around at the alien world with wonder. She was the sister of Captain Nicole Grant, who had died defending the moon. She had volunteered for this mission to honor her sister's memory. The council chamber was full when she arrived. 12 species, thousands of years of civilization, all watching a single human woman walk to the center of the room. Ambassador Grant, Magistrate Orvine said formally, you come here as the representative of Earth. What do you ask of this council? Lisa looked around at the alien faces. She thought about her sister. She thought about all the people who had died. She thought about what humanity had proven to the universe. I ask for membership, she said clearly. Earth wishes to join the Galactic Council. We wish to be partners in peace. We wish to help build a galaxy where no one lives in fear. Orvine nodded slowly. The council has already discussed this matter. We have a response. He raised his hand and gestured to the other members. One by one, they stood. Earth's request for membership is approved. Unanimously. Lisa felt tears in her eyes as the chamber erupted in applause. They had done it. Not just won a war, but earned a place among the stars. Later, as she walked back to her ship, Counselor Theron approached her. Ambassador, may I ask you something? Of course. Theron's feathered crest rippled with curiosity. During the battle, your people did things that should have been impossible. You sacrificed yourselves without hesitation. You fought when all hope was lost. Where does such strength come from? Lisa thought about the question for a long moment. Then she smiled. We're human, she said simply. It's what we do. She walked onto her ship and flew home to Earth, leaving the council to wonder at the strange and terrible species that had joined their ranks. The Karath Dominion never returned. They had learned what the council had learned. What the entire galaxy would eventually learn. Humanity was not to be conquered. Humanity was not to be underestimated. And when the darkness came, humanity would be there to meet it, not because they had to, but because they chose to. That was what made them human.